Hey, welcome to the VMware Cloud Foundation live stream. It's a monthly live stream where we discuss strategies and solutions for your cloud journey. I'm your host, Pete Fletcher, and today we're going to be discussing cyber-resilient private cloud. Now, what does cyber resilience mean in the first place? Well, this is a concept that brings business continuity, information system security, and organizational resilience together. It's the ability to continue delivering intended outcomes despite experiencing challenging cyber events like ransomware attacks or even natural disasters. And so we're going to be talking about this cyber resiliency in the context of VMware Cloud Foundation. I'm not alone. I'm joined by a panel of experts, starting with Banu de Arbalez. Banu, welcome.
So I'm Balu.
I
Nice
said
to meet
Banu. Shame
everyone.
on you. Okay, Balu. Sorry about that.
Oh,
It's close enough.
Hey, Balu.
it's good to break the ice.
Yeah, it's
Hi,
the three
everyone.
B's. I've got the three B's. So I've got Balu.
Indeed.
I've got Banu Vemula. Welcome. And then I've
Hello,
also
Pete.
got Bob Plankers, a good friend of ours, a big security guru. Welcome to the live stream.
I am a big guy, yes, and I do like security. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so yeah, I want to start very basically the agenda. We'll start real quick. I want to know understand what exactly is a cyber resilient private cloud when we're talking about VMware. Then I want to talk a little bit about how do we protect it, how do we recover if we need to. We're going to save some time for Q&A. So if you're watching this live, by all means, get your questions in there. We're going to be answering live questions, and yeah, let us know where you're from, and let us know what your experiences are. So we're going to save some time for Q&A as well. But I want to start with the overview. So Balu, maybe you can tell us what exactly is a cyber resilient private cloud?
Absolutely, Pete. Hi, everyone. It's great to be sharing our guidance on enabling a cyber resilient private cloud using the VMware Cloud Foundation technology stack. So I will start by covering a little bit of what are the three key pillars we're going to be addressing during today's event. So we would like to share a little bit about how VMware Cloud Foundation is uniquely equipped to enable our customers to deliver the cyber resilient private cloud, which has become such a big priority for both C-suite executives, IT practitioners, board members, right? Because cyber threats are actually a very big problem today that remains widely unaddressed. So there are three key things we'd like to highlight in today's event. The first one is going to be related to the infrastructure hardening, right? So all the mechanisms that need to be implemented into the infrastructure to be able to prevent these malicious attacks from essentially coming into your infrastructure in the first place, right? An additional layer of defense we're going to discuss today is related to the lateral security controls that will essentially prevent attacks from spreading within your infrastructure and defend your infrastructure from these attacks. And then finally, we know that even world-class security cannot be 100% fail-proof, primarily because these attacks have become increasingly sophisticated. So enabling a purpose-built cyber recovery strategy is essential, right, as a last line of defense. So I will be covering how our VMware Live Recovery solution, which is part of the VMware Cloud Foundation technology stack, uniquely enables our customers to confidently recover from these modern threats. So, Pete, I'll let you
Yeah.
get started and start asking the questions.
I like it. I like it. So yeah, if you haven't heard, yeah, VMware Live Recovery just GA'd. I think it was last week, or at least close to last week, but it was definitely announced a while. Yeah, I think at VMware Explore, it's now been GA. So definitely a core part of, last. I don't know if you guys remember, but we actually had the very first live stream event that we had was on VMware Cloud Foundation. We had Rick Walsworth on, and he talked all about sort of the core. What is VMware Cloud Foundation, and how can businesses accelerate their outcomes using VMware Cloud Foundation? Really great conversation. It's on the YouTube channel for VMware Cloud Foundation. I highly recommend you check that out, because Rick breaks down not only the the whole story about, VMware Cloud Foundation, the compute, the storage, the networking. But yeah, just really sets the foundation, because in addition to that core offering, we have plenty of add-ons, like Tanzu add-ons. There's some security add-ons. There's obviously vSphere Private AI Foundation, which a lot of people have heard at and explore, but the big one being, I think, VMware Live Recovery. And so I'm excited to have this conversation today about that. Bob, I'd love to start with you. Infrastructure hardening, when I hear that word, like, what does that mean? Like, are we talking about like protecting individual workloads? Are we talking about protecting all of the infrastructure, like the actual servers? What exactly does this hardening concept mean?
That's a really good question, Pete, because there is a difference between protecting infrastructure and protecting workloads themselves. And one of the big things about infrastructure, we can often see it when we talk about zero trust. For example, the zero trust is a concept that was popularized a couple of years ago with some executive orders in the U.S., and it's been around for quite a while. But the zero trust is the idea that we don't trust anything. We always verify that, whoever's sitting at my desktop, whoever's coming from my computer, we used to assume that it's me, but, you need to verify that from time to time. And, but how do you do that at the infrastructure level? Workloads have got different options than the infrastructure itself. Mm-hmm. And so there's sort of the two paths here, and we'll talk about more of the workload protections moving forward here. But at the infrastructure level, we don't want attackers creeping in underneath the workloads. We don't want them in our storage arrays. We don't want them in ESXi, any of that stuff. And so how do we make it less of an attractive target there? How do we secure it so that we can build a solid foundation for our workloads, build something stable, resilient, that sort of thing. So, why don't you go back to that first slide?
Oh, yeah.
Go back one. Yeah, there. So generally, this is the approach we take. I talk a lot about security, and we can get down in the technical weeds, but from an approach perspective, the idea that we want to ship a secure platform. We want all of the security controls where it's possible to turn them on. And sometimes it's not possible to turn them all on. You need to make a decision as an end user. Sometimes what NTP servers you have, that sort of thing. I can't predict that for you, but where we can, we try to turn everything on and have it ready to use. The other thing, the second thing that we do in our approach to security in VCF is we really try to make it easy to use. VMware, now Broadcom, we've got a small army of user experience designers that really worry about how humans interact with the product, the workflows, and all of that stuff. In fact, we're looking at that right now. And can we make it even easier to use? Native Key Provider is a great example of this, where we spent a lot of time worrying about how people will use this, how they will set it up, how can we prevent them from making errors and doing something we don't want them to do, that sort of thing. And it's a real differentiator for us. And it's nice because if it's easy to use, people will use it. And if it's simple, simplification drives adoption. I've always liked that. It also means that it's easy once you have security enabled. It's easy to explain it in terms of compliance to an auditor, for example. Last thing, having everything be consistent, having all the options be available, no matter if you're just on vSphere or if you're in VCF. Be able to turn on some of these protections and use them across the whole scope of the product sets, and that's really important to us. So if you can. Oh, go ahead, Pete. Oh, so one of the things I talk about often is that, the core of information security really has three tenets. They call them the CIA triad, not the Central Intelligence Agency of the U.S., but confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And confidentiality is the idea that we want to keep our data to ourselves. We don't want somebody who's not authorized to have access to it. And integrity is when I leave data somewhere, I want to return to it and have it be in a state that I left it in, or at least the state I expect it to be in. I don't want something to corrupt it, that sort of thing. And availability, what's the point of even having these systems if our data is not there when we need it, if we can't use it? And, ransomware is an integrity problem and an availability problem when it comes down to it. But we often think of confidentiality, it really is security. But my point is everything is a security feature if you look at it through these three lenses. And we can file, this is just just a brief example of features that are in VCF that we can file into one or more of these categories, and you can do that for pretty much everything. I bet there's somebody out there that would tell me that there's something that doesn't, you can't file it into one of these, but you can.
Yeah, I see Lifecycle Manager in there. Shouldn't that be more than just integrity?
Really important part. It's integrity, vulnerabilities happen. We've always been very transparent about vulnerabilities because it doesn't do anybody any good to keep it a secret. The attackers know this stuff. We need the defenders to know this stuff too. And and then make it easy to apply those updates. With vMotion is still the killer app for VCF and all that stuff, being able to move the workloads around. And I hear that there are some organizations that don't use vMotion, and it's mind boggling. Being able to patch your infrastructure without having to worry about the workloads, they just move around. It's awesome. And so, so this is how we see this. But, a lot of these features apply to workloads, apply to the infrastructure themselves. But at the infrastructure level, if you want to go one more slide forward,
mm-hmm.
We also do things at the infrastructure level, really nerdy things to try to deny attackers the ability to do bad things on the platform. Should they be able to get in? A good example, ptrace. Ptrace is a debugging tool, and we took that out of the products because one, most people don't need to use it. And two, we discovered, working with security partners, that attackers were able to use it to do bad things. So, deny them access to that. Sandboxes. We put VMs in a sandbox to prevent VM escapes, the ability to get out from a workload into the hypervisor. That's bad news. And so we've wrapped it in a sandbox to help prevent that. Exec installed only, being able to verify that executables, things that are running on the platform, came from a known source, an approved source using cryptographic means. Shell access, being able to deny logins to ESXi in vSphere 8, for example, in VCF 5, the 5 series of VCF. And then even stuff like MEM-eager 0, where there's a whole class of vulnerabilities that are CPU and hardware vulnerabilities, which really aren't our problem per se, but we can do things to help with that. We've got different CPU schedulers to help with the different vulnerabilities there. But even in memory, the idea that when you turn on a VM, it clears out all the memory underneath that VM. So it's all zeroed out and there's no data left. But what happens when you shut the VM off? Yeah. Well, when you shut a VM off, it's very much like deleting a file from a file system, where it doesn't actually remove the file. It just forgets about the file, removes it from the index, and that's kind of what happens in vSphere as well, where we shut it off by default. You shut it off and all of the data, all the secrets and all that stuff from that VM are still in memory somewhere. Well, what if we don't want that to happen? So there's an option now, and it's not set by default now, but it will be in the future. And that's part of because we've got a big ecosystem. And so letting the ecosystem get used to the stuff and letting it get tested a little bit, that's really important. But, what if we had an option that would clear out memory on the VM shutdown to help protect the workload and help keep secrets safe from hardware vulnerabilities if you can read memory and things. So we're doing a lot of stuff both at the workload levels and in the infrastructure to help harden and protect the environments.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, you got to do both for sure. So that's definitely that was a lot of information. That was really good, and a lot of those tools they certainly bring back some memories for me as an admin, and I love to see the way we're hardening those. How do people learn more about what VMware is up to, like what guidelines we have around security? Is there a resource that we can share or?
Absolutely. We publish a lot of stuff. I write prolifically about these things. Most of it's up on core.vmware.com/security. But if you just a Google search or whatever your search engine of preference or your search engine preferences, whatever, just search for VMware Security Configuration Guide and you'll get our baseline guidance there and links to everything else. We've got a lot of other stuff, compliance stuff too. So yeah. Oh, yeah. There's the link. And yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, I even created a short link for you there. Yeah, and I did that. I actually Googled it, and I was like, oh, there it is. That was easy enough to find.
Yeah, it should be right at the top. Yep.
Yeah, very good, very good. Cool. Well, let's move on to advanced, lateral security, which is a big topic. And Banu, you and I have been talking about this a lot lately.
Yes, Pete. We've been talking about it for some time. And let me ask you like a question. Like, I mean, you always do such an amazing job in conducting these webinars. And if I send you a thank you note tomorrow saying that, hey, Pete, you have done an amazing job, and I would like to send you to Hawaii,
Well,
and click, here is the link. So what would you do?
If that happened, if you emailed me, I'm opening it up right away because I'm like, this is my man. What's going on? Like, what's up? So yeah, I trust you immediately. So yes, if you send me an email, I'm going to open it up, right?
Yeah, I feel like Bob and I would also be open to going. So
yeah, like, oh, I trust this guy. What's up?
Let's do this,
And that's exactly how attackers get access to your network. See, we sent this to thousands of people, and there are like lots of people who know that there is a webinar happening, and they know who is Pete, and they know who is like Banu because I'm presenting. So somebody could actually send you an email pretending to be me, and then you end up clicking, and then what happens? That's how an attacker gets in. Now, when an attacker gets in, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to come in and then steal the data like this afternoon. So what really happens is they come in and they stay inside your network for a really long time. They pretend to be just like the good old Pete, just being around in the network, doing his day-to-day thing. But what happens is during that time, it takes really like 200 days for them to like discover something, and they try to hide themselves until they find like a high value server, and that's where they do the damage. So what that means is, to put it in context, if somebody hacks into a network today, you wouldn't know until like Valentine's Day of next year.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, that's when they find a server, and that happened with the server that has the most important information. And what do they do then? So first, they steal the data, and then they encrypt the data so that they can demand for ransom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think of it, right? You wouldn't want anybody calling you on Valentine's Day saying that, hey, Pete, you need to come back into the office and something happened to the data, would you?
No, I'm very busy on Valentine's Day. I've got a wife. I've got 2 daughters. I'm very busy on Valentine's Day. Do not call me.
Yeah, exactly. So we wouldn't want that. By the way, you wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff, Pete, because like we deployed Lateral security everywhere inside VMware and Broadcom. So our good old friend from IT Swapnil, he deployed like VMware Lateral security at every workload. So you wouldn't be able to do. So let me talk about like how the VMware Lateral security will help you. So in our security solution is pretty comprehensive. So when I sent you that email, when you tried to click on it, you wouldn't be able to do it because we have something called sandbox that will prevent you from downloading malicious files. So we block you right there.
Yeah.
So for attackers that actually bypass, who doesn't have, obviously, like you would bypass that, right? And then you move from place to place. So normally, if you are, let's just say you're in marketing, right? You wouldn't be able to go to finance servers, and you wouldn't be able to go and look at infrastructure code and things like that, right? So it's kind of foundational. So you want to make sure that you don't provide broad access to everybody. You define like who is in what department, and you have like development, you have your test environment, you have your marketing. So those are like basic foundational things that we help you with, things such as like a distributed firewall and a gateway firewall. And you can granularly segment your workload all the way down to just a single workload, like a virtual machine. And that powerful it is, and you can do completely in software.
Okay.
Now we talked about, right, when an attacker comes in, it's not like they're going after like really high value server. They're just like going from one place to a different place, and then they do things such as like, let's just say they need to connect back to the command and control. So how do you do that? If you are like Pete and trying to go to some malicious like URL, that gets easily flagged, right? So attackers don't do that. They're smart. They know how to hide themselves, right? So they would generate like, let's just say 1,000 web requests, like DNS requests, saying that they're going to 1,000 different websites. That looks normal. Maybe like it's not normal. So if you do something like that, that's where we have things such as like DGA algorithm, domain generation algorithm, which will actually detect that type of anomalous behavior. And from there, let's just say you really got access to a high value server, and then now you encrypt the data, and now you try to steal the data. When you try to steal the data, when you try to exfiltrate the data, our IDS IPS will prevent that like exfiltration of the data. Now, our IDS IPS is distributed in every workload. If you have a VMware hypervisor, you have an IDS IPS inside that. And imagine that you can manage all your thousands of these IDS, your VM ESXi servers with from like one place, and every one of them have this functionality turned on. That's really powerful. Now we talked about like how this happens. Now let's take a look at like how can you identify somebody that's inside your network. Maybe there is already somebody inside your network, or maybe they just got access to it, right? So the different components that we talked in the previous slide, all of them interact with our NDR solution, which is network detection and response. And it has the ability to collect data from multiple sources, such as your IDS IPS and your NTA and your malware prevention, and then stitch that together and present the data to you in a visual format and break it down and map it to the industry standard MITRE attack framework. So MITRE is a common framework that a lot of folks in the security world use, and to identify like if there are any like attacks or threat campaigns happening, and if there are, what stage they're in. So if somebody just got initial access, that might not be as important as a campaign that at the stage of exfiltration. So it will help you like correlate all these things and give you a visual representation of how where the campaign is and what are the affected hosts and what stage this campaign is in, so you can actually take an action. Normally, if you were to do this, you have to integrate these products and then analyze all the logs.
Oh, sorry.
And then come up with like
there. Is that the right?
how. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can skip to the next slide. I can talk through that. So the things that we talked about, the distributed firewall and the gateway firewall and the NTA, NDR, we talked about a bunch of things in the last couple of slides, right? So I'll say a couple of things. All of these things are integrated with each other. What that means is, if you were to have disparate systems, that one system that's just doing the IDS IPS and somebody else like different component, different vendor that's probably doing like one portion of the solution that we offer, it becomes harder to integrate. So our solution, Lateral Security, seamlessly integrates with all the components that we spoke until now, and it helps you like create like segments and have the foundational building blocks, such as like user shouldn't talk to this dev versus like test. And then if somebody tries to like come in and then suspiciously move, we flag whether it is like based on signatures or based on like behavior, and we have really powerful sandbox solution that will prevent like malware from like getting like infecting your systems, right? And all of this we provide with a powerful visualization tool, so you can actually see if there are any attacks happening. And we also help you to like create like security policies that you can we use like AI to look at your network and create the policies, which you can use those policies as your baseline and then modify it and then make the decision to push the policies when you're ready. So all of these things are like fully integrated, and the whole solution is powered by AI to get the analytics. It's a
Wow.
pretty powerful solution, and it's fully integrated. Not only it is fully integrated, the other important part is it's it it's fully integrated with the VCF as well. So you get the plug and play experience when you build your private cloud with your VCF. You want to make sure that you secure your private cloud, and you want a solution that really scales, that seamlessly integrates, and it's easy to operationalize. All those things you get with the VMware Lateral security because it's fully integrated with VCF. So that's you would want to make sure that you have the solution so that you protect from all these malicious actors trying to steal your credentials. Like Pete, you don't want that, right? I mean, in our case, you wouldn't be able to do that anyway because we have VCF and Lateral security deployed in all our data centers.
I like that. So you mentioned that this is fully integrated. Like, what are we talking about? Is this all part of the add-on VMware Live Recovery? Is that so? If I'm a VMware customer and I'm using VMware Cloud Foundation, I choose the add-on for VMware Live Recovery, and all of this is integrated, or is this where? How do I make sure that I have these protections?
Yeah, so live recovery is something that Bellu will talk
Okay,
about.
okay,
So
okay.
what I just covered is the security add-on for VCF,
It's the
and you can
security add-on.
actually exactly. So when you go buy your VCF, you would add on security through the VMware firewall. That's basically the SKU that you would buy, and that will give you the distributed firewall and the gateway firewall functionality and the intelligence functionality which we talked about for visibility, and then you can deploy all of this or like either like VMs or like bare metals and containers, all of it as the VMware firewall. And then you could also actually buy the VMware firewall with the advanced activation capability.
Ah,
That will give you the advanced functionality to prevent from like malware, detect any kind of like suspicious behavior using the NTA technology, and tie all these things together with the NDR. And then you also have the IDS IPS to help you like with block the command and control access or data exfiltration. All that stuff is part of the VMware firewall with the advanced threat prevention package. And it's pretty simple. We simplified our packaging and it, not only just like integration with the product. So you would get the VCF and then you would add on either the VMware firewall or the VMware firewall with advanced threat prevention. That's how you get the security for your
got
private
it.
cloud.
Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense now. But for a minute, I thought you were saying that it was part of live recovery, which I was a little confused. But now that makes perfect sense. So very sloppy transition over to VMware Live Recovery. Balu, I would love to talk to you a little bit about cyber recovery, and it's been a topic of obviously a very big topic for VMware customers, certainly since for the past couple of years, but certainly more prominently in the past year or so. How are organizations today approaching cyber recovery, and what can they be doing differently?
So let me start by covering a few topics that I think we should address before we jump into what organizations are doing today
Yeah,
and how they actually need to operate to be able to better recover their infrastructure in the case they do get hit, right? So the first thing I'd like to highlight is a strong paradigm shift that we've seen in ransomware attacks over the last few years, right? So up until 2017, what we saw is that attacks were mostly file-based, right? Essentially, what this means is that a traditional signature scan on a backup copy would detect the malicious file. You would delete the file and move forward, right? Now, in this situation, it is accurate to say that having an immutable air gap backup solution that's able to orchestrate recovery for you would be enough. However, starting in 2017, what we've seen is a strong shift towards fileless attacks. And the big issue that fileless attacks present is that they are undetectable through traditional file scanning methods. So essentially, if you grab an offline backup, run a signature scan on it, it'll come back clean, right? Even though there is malicious code that's been injected into that workload. Of course, the consequences of that can be severe because you can reinfect your production environment, extend the damage that the attack can cause. It can encrypt more data, exfiltrate more data, and all of the like unfavorable consequences that Banu and Bob mentioned early on, right? So a little bit more about these fileless attacks, right? They will work in memory. They will leverage legitimate tools and programs to be able to infiltrate your systems. And a key topic that Banu just covered that I'd like to double down on is how ransomware attacks have had increasingly long dwell times, right? So as Banu mentioned, these attacks will dwell within your infrastructure for long periods of time, undetected, right? So another thing they do when they dwell within your environment is to move laterally. So they will infect workloads that are connected through the network with these infected VMs and essentially increase the damage that can be done into your infrastructure. So in this context, we are faced with an additional challenge to be able to identify, contain, and eradicate these malicious attacks from your infrastructure. For this reason, it is accurate to say that having immutable air-gap backups is no longer enough. The only way to identify these fileless strains of ransomware, which actually represent around 70% of attacks today, is by first powering on the workload and running a behavioral analysis on that workload. Because the behavior of the data will be what actually indicates the malicious presence within that workload. So this analysis also needs to be done within the bounds of what we call an isolated recovery environment. This is essentially a quarantined, safe clean room that is completely separated from production, where you can actually safely power on these workloads, analyze the data, and be able to select which recovery points you would like to use to bring back to production. Now, we have integrated all of these capabilities into the VMware Cloud Foundation technology stack through a new add-on that we actually GA'd a few days ago. It is VMware Live Recovery. And VMware Live Recovery is exclusively designed to deliver powerful cyber and data resiliency for VMware Cloud Foundation environments. The way we do this is by combining the power of these proven VMware solutions to allow customers to benefit from disaster recovery and ransomware recovery within the same product. So a little bit more about that, and we're going to focus on the cyber recovery use case for the purpose of this conversation. Now, a few key differentiators that we deliver through VMware Live Recovery, which essentially have an important value proposition that our customers don't need to stitch these multiple security, networking, recovery, orchestration products together to be able to achieve this confident cyber recovery.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'll highlight here is that we are allowing our customers to extend their on-premises recovery operations to the cloud, right? So they can actually deliver this in an as-a-service manner. And the first thing about the cyber recovery capabilities within VMware Live Recovery are related to a guided step-by-step ransomware recovery workflow. Now, this workflow essentially integrates a series of capabilities that will allow our customers to identify these recovery point candidates, safely validate them within the bounds of this isolated recovery environment, and finally be able to conduct all of these operations at scale to bring these workloads, these clean workloads back to production, thus preventing the reinfection I was talking about earlier. So first of all, we will offer something called guided restore point selection. This solves for a major challenge in cyber recovery, which relies on the fact that it is not as easy as picking your latest backup copy and recovering that, right? The reason for this is, as I mentioned, the dwell times are on the rise. So essentially what happens is that if you grab your latest snapshot, it is most likely going to be infected.
Oh, yeah.
So this does present a challenge, right? Because you're faced with a situation where you have hundreds, maybe thousands of restore points, and you don't really know which one to pick. So the pressure
They
to
might all
recover
be
is
bad,
high.
right?
Right. So here's where you have to get these additional tools to be able to help you identify which recovery points are good candidates. Now, the next step is for us to provision this isolated recovery environment, which we allow our customers to do directly from the VMware Live Recovery console. Many other solutions in the market require the customers to stand up, manage, and secure this environment themselves, which, as you can imagine, not only has a direct impact on their time to recovery, but also on the total cost of ownership of
Oh,
their
yeah.
recovery solution and the recovery costs. So we allow our customers to instantly provision this environment and essentially run this behavioral analysis and the next-gen AV analysis within this IRE. This is also embedded into the workflow, so it is actually something that happens automatically. And we're able to give our customers this visibility into what threats are present within the recovery point they're analyzing. Now, we also have features such as file and folder level restore. So essentially you can pick and choose different files and folders from different recovery points, create this golden build to essentially minimize the data loss if you are talking about very mission critical applications, right? And then finally, an important thing to highlight related also to something Bonnie pointed out, these attacks tend to move laterally, right? So if you power on a workload that's infected within the IRE, what's probably going to happen is that when you power on the workload, the attack is going to infect the workload next to it, right? Even within the bounds of the IRE. And this is an undesirable consequence. So we also integrate our networking capabilities into the workflow to basically isolate the network of these VMs from one another. These isolation capabilities can either be pre-configured or our customers can customize them themselves. And finally, what we'll do is we will restore these workloads back to production once we have validated these recovery points. And this can, of course, be done at scale, right? You don't need to do this on a per VM basis, which we acknowledge would be completely inefficient for our customers who have very large environments. So essentially, and tying this back to what we were talking about in the beginning, the cyber resiliency or a cyber resilient private cloud many times involves stitching all of these products together, right? Your lateral security, your recovery, your hardening, your EDRs, all of these things. So it is a huge value proposition that VMware offers to empower our customers to deploy all of these capabilities within the same platform. And that will not only have an impact on their ability to protect their data, but also in terms of the IT resources they're going to have to deploy to be able to maintain all of this. And of course, the total cost of ownership that is actually such a big issue for many organizations everywhere.
Yeah, setting
I know
this
that
up,
was a
I mean,
lot.
yeah, no, it's a lot, but it's real. Like, so, I mean, anyone who's been in this industry long enough, we can understand the pains of configuring a lot of this stuff previously, and then honestly finding a place to park it. Like, where is my DR location? Where is my clean room? Where do I set this up? So yeah, to have this almost like as a service in a location that's going to be available, that's going to help. Yeah, completely simplifying something that was in the past at least at minimum a very complex configuration solution to have to take on. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Very cool. So That's great information. I know there's only been a few questions in the chat. I'm calling out on the live community here that is watching this. Send in your questions before we start to address any questions or comments. And I've got a few small questions, but we'll start with the fact before we do that there are other live streams going on. As I mentioned earlier, so I host a podcast called Virtually Speaking. We recently did a podcast episode on VMware Live Recovery. We had some of the nerds that are in tech marketing come on and get under the hood and talk all about the various components of that. So that definitely wet my whistle for this discussion. In addition to that, this live stream happens every month. Last month, as I mentioned, we talked to Rick Walsworth to get a foundational conversation out of the way around what VMware Cloud Foundation looks like and what are some of the benefits there. That's on the YouTube channel at VMware. In addition to these live streams, though, that YouTube channel is filled with great information. Certainly, you'd be remiss. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the technical deep dive series that's out there. So if you're looking at VMware Cloud Foundation, if you've used any VMware products before, this is a really good series to sort of chew on for a while. Heath Johnson, Kyle Gleed, and team have been really going under the hood of VMware Cloud Foundation, from deployment to lifecycle management, day two operations, just really understanding SDDC Manager, networking configuration considerations, all of that covered in that. So be sure to take a look at that. But with that, I wanted to bring on one extra person into this conversation from technical marketing, Cato Grace. Cato, welcome to the live stream.
Thanks a lot, Pete. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I was looking at the chat. I see our good friend Waldemore's been on there a lot. He's definitely a good friend of the VMware family. Hey, Waldemore, thanks for your input. Have you seen anything worth mentioning on this? Now, I know there's questions coming in on Twitter as well as YouTube and LinkedIn. Any themes that you might have seen out there?
I haven't noticed anything in particular for today, but just in conversations that I've had with customers, there's definitely a number of questions about how things are changing with VMware Live Recovery and what's new and things like that. And I think a reassurance for people is that, while VMware Live Recovery is a big name change, and we are changing, creating the management console, a centralized license and things like that, but that the underlying products are by and large the same. Like, they're not, we didn't make a drastic change to the functionality, and moving to VMware Live Recovery is not a disruptive process. There's nothing that you have to reconfigure or reinstall or anything like that. It's, just the same as it was before. And then understanding too that just like Site Recovery Manager and VMware Cloud Disaster Recovery worked with all the different parts, all the different versions of vSphere and VCF and things like that before, we have that same capability now that VMware Live Recovery continues to work with, of course, VCF and VBF, but if you also have other versions of vSphere, it works with those too.
Oh, nice. So what if I've got some storage arrays and I've been, using, third-party storage for a while. I was using SRM back in the day, but now I'm moving to VCF, and I want to bring my previous investments into this new world of VCF. I'm going to build out some workload domains with different hosts. Can I still take advantage of that technology to contribute to my VMware Live Recovery configuration?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, anything within the VCF environment will work with VMware Live Recovery. It's the same. If we're talking about VMware Live Cyber Recovery, it's the same replication mechanism that we were using previously. It works. Lets you replicate VMs that are running on any supported VMware storage. If we're talking VMware Live Site Recovery, of course, you have array replication that's still supported. You have vSphere replication. You've got vVol replication. So you have all those different options that you can work with.
Okay, what if Banu is like sending me emails and are those emails that are phony and dangerous? Are they going to replicate? This is a trick question. Are they going to replicate over to my other copy on these third-party arrays?
So if we're talking VMware Live Site Recovery, VMware Live Site Recovery is not going to help you really in the way that you need help from a ransomware standpoint. you really want to be looking at VMware Live Cyber Recovery for your ransomware protection. VMware Live Site Recovery is going to protect you from pretty much any other kind of disaster. Your data center burns to the ground, your whatever it is, storage array fails, something like that, you're going to be protected. But yeah, if some malevolent person tries to start encrypting your data, you're going to want a ransomware solution for that. And that's VMware Live Cyber Recovery.
And
yeah.
I would add to that that the VMware Live Site Recovery and the VMware Live Cyber Recovery are two underlying technologies within the same add-on, right? So you are able to protect the same workload using both. So especially for organizations who would still like to rely on an active configuration for their disaster recovery, but also want this cyber recovery protection, they can actually benefit from both use cases within a unified management experience. So
yeah, definitely.
Just wanted to.
Yeah, that's a great point to highlight. And just to be clear too, that the currently that's only available if you're using array replication for site recovery, but that's something that we are continuing to work on. But yeah,
Nice.
you can provide VMs with both of those protections at the same time.
Okay, we got a question coming in from YouTube from Manol here. Will it be possible to have live recovery on VVF as opposed to VCF, or as a separate product?
Yes. Yeah, and that was I tried answering that earlier, but yeah, definitely you can, regardless of obviously it works with VCF, it works with VVF as well, and then even other versions of vSphere. If you're standard, I can't remember what the other versions that we still have, but if you have versions from previous versions, it works with those as well. As long as it's on our compatibility list, it'll function with that.
Very nice, very nice. All right, I think those are all the questions I see there. So, folks, I want to thank you for first, Cato, thank you so much for moderating the chat and adding your expert input into the conversation, and appreciate you joining this live stream. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care. So, my 3 Bs, back to my 3 Bs. Balu, Banu, and Bob, thank you so much for joining this live stream. I think there's just been a wealth of information out there. As I mentioned earlier, VMware Live Recovery has GA'd. There's an announcement on the VMware blog for that. We are going to leave links to other resources, including the hardening guide and any other content. There are some links also in the chat to core.vmware.com, which has a lot of this security information. So we will be leaving links on the show notes of this that you can find on the YouTube channel for VMware Cloud Foundation. But yeah, my 3 Bs, thank you so much for joining this conversation. And I look forward to chatting with you guys on the next one.
Thank you, Pete, and look forward for my email.
I'm going to be watching your emails from now on.
Thank you, Pete.